Anybody who this is their first time to participate in something? Okay, hi, welcome. What's your name? Hey, Allison, I'm Brian. So everybody else knows me already. So I'm leading the consulting team, helping work on the zoning ordinance update. So I have a presentation tonight, and I'm going to try to go pretty quickly so we can have time for question and answers again. If anybody in the back wants to come closer, you can, because it's kind of a far away screen. Did somebody raise their hand already? Okay, sorry. Let's see. So for those who didn't get to come to everything, we had over 80 participants at the opening presentation and public workshop, the roundtable event. That was awesome. Then we had over 120 participants in the roundtable meetings where we talked about different areas like downtown and industrial areas and student and university relations. So that was awesome. And then we had over 250 donuts consumed. Unfortunately, half of those, I think, just me and my team ate. There's only 4 of us. But it was awesome. Thanks for having those donuts, and the cider is great too. And we did this amazing map exercise around the tables. If you didn't get to participate, we still have maps around on the walls here that show what all your neighbors said. And then we took all of these maps that you see, and we consolidated all the dots onto one map, which is really neat because you can start to see patterns develop. Green dots, if you remember, mean things that you love the most. Red dots are areas that need improvement, and blue dots are opportunities. And you can start to see, obviously a lot of groups had the same ideas. Many, many red dots, of course, along Mission. That was probably the #1 thing we heard about this weekend and last week. And, of course, lots of green dots in downtown. Downtown was a big winner, and also the parks as well. Got lots of green dots, and then many others throughout the mapping. So here are the things that we heard that people liked, sort of the top items. Safe streets for bikes and pedestrians, better parking management, utilization of downtown open spaces, improved quality of life for all, quality student housing, highlighting the river and existing park network, and then downtown revitalization with a wider variety of businesses, downtown entertainment. Improvements to Mission Street would include safer crossings, higher quality development, east-west connectivity, and then focusing on the parks and green spaces. And a lot of people said we need more parks on the east side. And so when you actually look at these maps, you can see there are plenty and lots of parks over here, which is great, but over here it's pretty devoid of green on that map. So that's something to work on and improve. We also heard things that people weren't as excited about. They talked about haphazard development, underutilized parcels and vacant lots, traffic, dangerous intersections, loss of historic buildings and single-family houses, lack of east-west connectivity, limited business hours downtown, light pollution, too much parking. Not enough parking was the next one. So as you can see, right? That's the way it always is. That just depends on if you got a parking spot that day in front of the place you tried to park, and then it varies. So high speed and unsafe corridors. We heard about the crosswalks of doom, and we saw pictures of people taking their life in their hands, running across the street or walking. High density housing in single family areas and a lack of green spaces on the east side of the city. So what we set out to do in the zoning ordinance, and I'm sorry, there is one person who hasn't been here yet, but I'll catch you up afterwards on the details of this. But in a nutshell, we're changing the zoning, right? And we're going from a use-based zoning ordinance, where use was the most important thing, separating one thing from the next, to a character-based zoning ordinance, where character is the way that we group things together, and things that have similar character. And so we have this idea of the character districts, from the most natural to agricultural to the suburban neighborhoods to starting to have some mixed use and single family and attached neighborhoods, as well as the most urban, which would be your downtown. We did a zoning translation where we looked at all the existing zones and started to consolidate them into those character-based zones based on pure metrics, not even looking at the map or having gone out there. It's just on paper what seemed like it could go together. But then we go through the process of field testing that and understanding. We go through and we measure, and these are what we talked about, our synoptic surveys, where we understand the dimensional constraints of each of the different character districts. So we go and we measure things like block dimensions, and we measure setbacks and typical lot widths, and all of these kind of things start to go into it, as well as many, many other numerical metrics. And then we sort of zoom in and we look at, again, building heights and other things. And so we've taken all of that and we're turning it into, this is the beginnings of your code. These are actually pages that will be in your code. And we had our artist, our renderer, JJ, create these renderings that are representative of what these character districts are looking like or feeling like. So this would be the T3 suburban zone and what that might look like. And if, hopefully, it doesn't look strange to you. It's like, oh yeah, we have places like that already. Exactly, that's the point, right? So as we go through, we also figured out that there are different suburban neighborhoods here that are sort of the 1950s, 60s, 70s vintage, where instead of having the lots be sort of narrower and deep, they were wider and shallower with sort of ranch-style houses on them. And so we came up with a subzone that we're calling CD3L, or suburban large, or maybe call it wide, or I'm not sure what yet. But we sometimes we call it estate, but I just, I didn't know if that was appropriate here in this community. It's like, estate lots, So anyway, so this is what that looks like. And again, you recognize this kind of thing. So wider lot, sort of deeper setbacks. There's usually, in a lot of these, there's not sidewalks, and mailboxes out front and those kinds of things. So this would be a subzone of the CD3. Then we move into the fourth zone, and we are looking around for some examples, because you start having some mixed use in this. You typically would start to have some attached things like row houses. You guys don't have very much of this currently, and so the pictures that we have are a bit of a stretch, and so sometimes we look regionally as well. And so, again, looking at all the dimensional metrics and setbacks and things, trying to understand what that's like. And then here's the beginnings of the code pages. And you'll see in the pictures that are the inspirational pictures, we've actually, like, these are row houses, but they're not from here. They're from elsewhere. And so all of that would be calibrated to make sure it's architecturally representative of this region. And this is what that starts to look like. And in this picture, because we get one picture, we kind of put it all in there. So one of the things you find in CD4 is a variety of building types, the widest variety of building types, really. And so you'll see here on the corner, it's kind of a corner store. You guys have some things like this. You used to have more of them, as did all neighborhoods. And so this might be some general things. You might walk down and get a loaf of bread or some milk, and there's maybe serve some sandwiches. And then here's some row houses, and then you start to see these are actually apartment houses. And this is really cool. I was really excited. We were looking through a book of your historic photographs, and we found these cool, it was like 3 historic apartment houses that are gone today. And we actually just used it there. That's what it looked like. So we used it in this rendering. I thought it was really neat. And then moving down the street, detached single family as well. So it's a very, very wide variety. And a lot of people say the most interesting of the zones. It's kind of the most charming and has the most character. So then we went into the 5th character district, which is pretty straightforward. That's your downtown. And again, looking at all the elements of it and understanding what you have going on currently. And here's where that's beginning to go. And here we actually were showing, right now I think the tallest building in the downtown is like 3 stories, the older buildings, historic buildings. You used to have some maybe that were a little taller, but they're gone now. But right now it's currently zoned, like, what's the current height right now? 75 feet high in your downtown. You currently can go 75 feet high. We didn't put that in the drawing because I didn't want to freak everybody out, because you're not used to seeing that. I think, probably in certain areas that might be really cool, but realistically with the market as it is, unless something dramatic changes in the market, I don't think you ever, will have a 75-foot building for quite a while. So anyway, so we went 1 story higher than you have currently, just to show, and how that might look, and then we stepped down to 3 and then 2. And so you could, hopefully this is also, sort of a familiar site, even though it's not your exact downtown. We didn't, copy it exactly. But here's what that character district would look like. So that's sort of the neighborhoods and the downtown and all of that. But probably the thing we heard about the most throughout the time we've been here during the Planapalooza are the corridors, most specifically Mission. And it got, like I said, many red dots. There was no love for Mission. I think people like the things that are there. It's convenient and whatnot. But the experience of Mission, the character of Mission, is the character of every other strip highway around the country, right? So I wanted to show you guys some things for inspiration purposes. Because the thing that's tricky about imagining a transformation of something like a corridor like Mission is that it's, in your mind, it's an auto-oriented place. That's where all the drive-throughs go. That's where the strip malls go, all of those things. And so I really wanted to show you guys that you can still have that auto-oriented stuff that the market might demand, but do it in a character-filled way. So here are a few examples of what we call suburban retrofit. So here's a restaurant on the corner here, and there's actually, you can't see it in this view, but there's a drive-through that comes through the back of the building here, and the parking's in the rear. Here's the streets, and this can happen in a suburban context. This is a pharmacy, and you can see here, this is actually the edge of the canopy, so the drive-through, you come here, you drive through there, and come out the other side. That's a drive-through pharmacy. Here's an example of a bank. Here you can see even better. Here's the teller aisles here. You come through, you drive through there, and you head out the back. Parking's in the rear. These are other shops. People can live above. There can be offices above. And so these are, it's pretty clear how that can happen. Here's a gas station, maybe the most auto-centric use of all on the corridor. It's all things. But a gas station these days now have convenience stores associated with it, and they just happen to be in a form that is not so great, right? So you just simply pull it up to the corner, you come in the back, you get your gas, you head back out. All these are sort of associated uses that go along with it, and again, you've still held the street edge in it like you would in a traditional downtown environment. And so that's how you would do a suburban retrofit gas station. So, you think, well, how will people know there are gas pumps back there? Trust me, people figure it out, right? I mean, it's, and these days too, what do? How do you get anywhere, right? Your phone tells you how to get there. You don't have to know. They still get signage and all of that stuff. So here's another example. This is a big box store, if you're not familiar, right? This is a big box retrofit. Big boxes, you guys don't have too much of this. Your suburban strip highway is a bit more modest in its parking in most places, except for like Kmart. That's a more typical situation. But this is a good example of a big box store with its large parking, and it's kind of got these little out parcels. And in this case, just for ease of illustration, we went ahead and put the gas pumps in the back, right? So here you can see how it begins to transform. So did you see that? A little row of buildings came. Now you've got sort of a main street leading up to the front of the building. And then another row comes in here, and this starts to fill in. And now you've got a nice streetscape that comes in there. You still got all this parking out front for these guys. Here comes some more. Now you've got complete intact blocks where you walk around. This is mixed use. There'll be apartments and things. There starts to have some what we call liner buildings where the front, the sort of blank walls of the big box start to infill on the front there. And then one day, when it's no longer financially feasible to truck things all across the country and gas prices go too high and big boxes transform, and as we see, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And this actually shows the big box going away, and now this becomes just a part of any great town, city, village, wherever. And then now all these auto-oriented uses here have transformed. This has become has a slip lane here for side access with parallel parking. And now you've completely transformed the big box experience into a real place with character. That, it's kind of hard to think about that when you talk about it until you start to see images like this. So here's what we were doing. This is just for fun. This is not required that anybody has to do this tomorrow. So anybody who owns any property that I'm about to show will be meddled with. Please don't freak out and run out of the room, okay? So this is fun. This is exciting to me. So one of the things that we heard throughout the time we were here was the possibility of taking the pressure off of the neighborhoods by starting to encourage student housing out along the corridor at particular nodes. And so looking at the opportunities for some more intensity there, we don't have to worry so much about, the character, because the character that's there is not what anybody's looking for, so we can start to really transform it in a more substantial way. And we heard people talking about maybe 5 and 6 stories out there on the corridor, and mixed use and all of these things. And so we went with it. We said, let's just see what this looks like. So for those who aren't familiar, this is Wayside. Right there. You guys know where that is? Anybody been there before? Right. Anybody been in the cage? Bowling alley. Okay, great. So here's that's what that is. So this is Mission, and what's this road called? Broomfield. Great. Exactly. You guys do know where it is. All right. So here's what could happen with a character-based approach, trying to encourage student housing to occur in places that are adjacent to campus and not necessarily adjacent to lots and lots of neighborhoods. So the suspense is killing you, I know. Okay, so I don't know if whoever owns Kmart is in this room, but bear with me. So we took some liberties over here as well as over here. So you notice the Wayside is not here anymore. It could be in the ground floor of one of these buildings. But what we are showing here is a mixed-use, walkable network of streets. Here this is primarily apartments, swimming pools, and all of the things that college kids are like. Do you have swimming pools here? Can you do that? You have to heat them, I guess, right? Make them enclosed. Anyway, most places in the country when you do college apartments, it's all about the swimming pool. But then there's a large civic space here, so this is a big park. And so what happens is if people want to go out and hang out and have a good time, they're all self-contained right in here. And so you put one policeman there, and one there, and one, takes 3 policemen, done, right? It's good. You're good to go. And it's contained, and they're taller buildings, and so the noise and stuff just kind of gets stuck in there. It's in its own little canyon. And it's great, but it's also part of the streetscape here and transforming this. And it's a very subtle thing, but just look at, see cut. Oops, wrong way. So all these curb cuts that are all over the place. Now you start to clean that up, and now there's just a few curb cuts. So down here we're sort of lightly transitioning. Here this is a major transition, and most importantly at the intersection here at this node, this actually becomes a place. This becomes a real place where real people want to go. So here, I'll make it a little bit easier to see. Let's fade back the background. So all of this is new development that could occur here. We have parking in the rear, you see. It's all accommodated for. You have, we actually incorporated urban farm at the edge there on the campus property, but it seemed like there's just grass now. So we heard some people interested in urban agriculture, and so just for demonstration purposes, put that there. And so the students are now looking out across the urban farm over to campus. People are living above and out on Mission Street. Now, this said, if this kind of thing happens, it's planned for, it's zoned for it. When you go talk to the DOT about what you want Mission Street to look like, all of a sudden the conversation starts to change a little bit, because now they quit thinking about it as such a suburban speedway and they want cars to go through fast. You're now showing them that we're trying to sort of reclaim this and make this just a great street in our city. And once you get through the node, maybe you go faster again, maybe the character changes. So anyway, this is what we've been having some fun with today. And can't forget the crosswalks. Did you say that? No, this is kind of what it's like now, right? Crosswalks, lights, you push a button, it says walk now, you go across, you're safe, you're not hustling, trying trying to save your life. So anyway, so you can start to see with some small tweaks, you can really change the character of even a road like Mission. So, oh, and here you go. So zooming in here, you see you have the buildings pulled back. There's outdoor dining here on the street. You'd walk across here if you're a student. And we also connected to the other student apartments that are already there and there. And so, now they can walk safely through. It's just all about the connectivity. They're not having to get out in their car and drive. We're limiting the number of trips on the streets here on Mission. So we start solving traffic problems as well. And we're creating character. And we're having safety happening. And we're taking pressure off the neighborhoods, on and on and on. So this is, we're here to talk about zoning. This is obviously a bit holistic approach to things, but the zoning will support this, is the idea. So I wanted you guys to start to see what we're talking about. So this is a great transformation sequence. This is another corridor. This is one of our friend firms that we work with on other projects did this really cool sequence. So imagine this is Mission Street, right? This could be any street in the country, so we'll just call it Mission for now. So you start to see, you make some changes there with some landscaping, and that's just decoration. If you stop there, you've done something. It looks better than it did before, but you haven't done all that much. Now you start to bring some buildings in and infill the parking lots. Now you do it on the other side. Now you've got a street. Now you go down there. Look at that. Think about what the first image was. That's crazy. Like, it seems impossible to believe that it's that close to not being terrible, So anyway, this is, I think, a helpful thing for you guys to start to visualize these transformations, these changes, and, it'll take time. But the thing that's great is, when you propose big ideas and you show sort of, computer animations of how things might happen and artist drawings or whatever, this is real. This is, in Rochester, New York, they have done the same thing. This is their big, speedy corridor, even worse than, wider than, speedier than what you guys have out there. And across the street is McDonald's and this and that, just the typical suburban strip stuff. Campus is right over here, just out of the image, and they've done this new development. Exactly the same kind of stuff that we're talking about. Tall buildings, students living above, commercial on the ground floor, streetscapes, plazas, parks, and connectivity, and all of these things that make a great place. So this can happen. These are real things that happen to places that have universities. Here's what it looks like from the ground. How can you imagine if that were Mission Street? Twinkly lights across? Wow. So this was the other thing we heard the most about, right? Student housing. So I just wanted to show this map, okay? This map is a map showing all of the lots that are currently occupied by student rentals. Is that a way to say that? Yeah, so the darker the color, the more the people, right? So you see some, they're like 2. Everybody likes 2. 2's better than 16. Some of them have 16 in them, 18, I don't know. I can't remember how many the max is. Anyway, this is a really interesting thing because, you always hear about what's going on, what the situation is. Until you really see the map, you start to, I didn't have a full picture of what's going on and sort of how to get the genie back in the bottle and all of that stuff. So this is kind of zooming in on the sort of most talked about areas here. And, everybody is asking about the line and all of those kind of things. And so this is kind of, I guess, the area that people talk about. And what you start to see here, it's interesting to me, is that every single block in this area has every single lot except for 1, 2, 3 they're no longer detached single family houses. They're rental. There aren't any families in there except for maybe 2. So that's interesting. And as you go up the street, you can kind of draw that line up here a little bit further, and it starts to peter off as you get closer and closer to downtown. So anyway, I thought that was very interesting. But the other thing that I found interesting was the fact that these lots really look about the same as these lots over here, except for they're zoned differently. So as we've been thinking about the zoning map, this is the draft map. So obviously the big red is the campus. The darker orangish color is the CD3 larger lot. And then you get into the tan, that is this regular CD3. You'll see along Mission, along campus, it's the fifth zone, CD5. And then as you pass campus, at certain nodes, at certain intersections, key intersections, you have a little bit of that fifth zone, but in between it's the fourth zone. It's a little bit lower scale, less intense. And then moving up, as you get into the gray, this is the industrial area up here. Here we are actually, I don't know if we can or not, but we're showing the civic space as a green color now. So, because like if you look at the zoning map right now, it's just all zoned and you can't tell where the civic spaces are. Let's see if there's anything else of particular interest. Oh, and then these areas here, the blue are areas where there's potential for larger scale, sort of larger acreage development rather than just infill here or there. And so we're showing these as just kind of a holding color, which would be for traditional neighborhood developments, which would have, excuse me, several of these zones in them. So you'd have the CD3 as well as some sort of neighborhood center CD4. But we, there's no plan for it yet, so we couldn't say exactly where those colors would be. And so there will be some specific parameters on when those parcels are developed. They have to have a certain percentage mix of each of these different character districts, and it gives guidance on how to develop them, so they know that blocks have to be like this, about this big, and all that. But it still gives whomever chooses to develop them the opportunity to design them according to what they're looking for. But probably the number one thing that you guys might have interest in is what we did here. So here's campus here, and along the road there, whose name I can never remember. What's it called? What? Thank you. So along that road, we're showing CD4, so that allow for some commercial, some more apartment kind of stuff, but also single family as well. But what you'll see is that we took notice, and our synoptic survey showed us that the character, even in these areas here that are currently all purpley pink on that other map I showed you, are the same character, except for where something's been torn down and something new has been built that's maybe not as much in character. And so what we've done is we've actually shown this all as CD3. And so the character of all this should stay the same. Over here, however, closer to the the sort of crook of the campus zone, we're showing this as CD4. It's already 100% in rental, even though some of this is as well. We felt like, again, kind of to take some of the very specific pressure off of this neighborhood, that if you, made this a little bit more intense, a little, allowed for that to start to transform intentionally, but not too large, not too big of scale, that would allow this to start to free up over time. That said, zoning it like this, I don't know if it's going to help. I don't know if it's going to solve the problems. It's going to keep the character intact, so we'll at least solve that. As far as who goes in the house, what's happening in the house, what's the use, who has a license to this and that, all these things that I hear about, I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't know how that, this is only what the zoning has to do with, what the zoning is going to say. So as far as we can help with the character of that, that's what we're trying to do. So hopefully that helps give everybody a little bit of peace of mind. So timeline and next steps, we're finishing up the Planapalooza. We're about to move on into the drafting phase where we start, or continue, I should say, because we've been actually working on writing the code here, but continue on with that. And so to get you guys a first draft ready to look at, and then that'll be released at some point. And then the idea would be to have this all wrapped up and adopted sometime sooner than later in 2017. We have it shown roughly now in September, but as I said before, that all depends on you guys, how quickly it moves forward or not. We need you to go on the Facebook page and participate. Let people know that you've come to this and you saw things and you hopefully learned some things, hopefully enjoyed yourself, or if you have concerns, let them know that as well, so that as we go, it's not normal that we have less people at the finish than that we did at the beginning. But thankfully, I heard there's a few competing things tonight, so I won't take it personally. But I was really impressed, so I just have to say, for those of you who came on Saturday and Sunday and hung out with us over the weekend, like, that's awesome, especially city staff and everybody like that who, like, they're probably ready to be done with the week, and they were here working with us. And Jacob, you know, I don't know if you guys saw, he had a desk here with us. I mean, he's part of the team and just really drafting all this. And, you know, Nancy and everybody, I mean, it's just been unbelievable cooperation and teamwork, and all the different departments came in. We had engineering in here today, and so it's we couldn't have asked for a better process. I hope that it's been helpful for you guys. But what I want to do is just turn it over to you guys to talk to us and let us know, are we close? Did we miss the mark? Are we hit the nail on the head? Hopes, dreams, aspirations, fears, concerns? Anything? Anybody? Who wants to go first? Yes.
Charlie Kinzel, I live on Glen Street. Wondering what the classification is. You had two CD3 classifications. What was that second CD3?
The second CD3 was for the newer suburban neighborhoods that were, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s, with more ranch format, sort of wider. Then they are deep. A lot of the older neighborhoods have more narrow and deep lots. So that's what the second one is. So
are the regulations be any different between the two?
Only ever so slightly, in that we're, you know, just trying to make sure we respect that lot dimension pattern. So it's not like we're necessarily going in and trying to have all the lots now become smaller and things. So it's really intended to just preserve the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Who else?
I just have a question, and that is, with all the people here, has iRide been involved? Because sometimes it's important to design things so buses can get in and out and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think I have heard from anybody from iRide. As we were thinking about all this, so we were thinking about that because we want everything we do to be transit ready, so that we can, you know, in some places we go, they don't even have any transit, and so they're hoping they get some, and those that do have it, we want to make sure that it can work, because as much as we want people to walk, there's only so far they're willing to walk. They've got to be able to get on transit and go some, you know, like, can you imagine walking from one end of Mission to the other? I don't care how cool we make it, you know, it's like it's a long way, so.
So first, I'd like to thank the consultants, the staff that spent all the time this weekend. I know my wife and I were here for 3 hours yesterday, and you guys were patient with us, so thank you. But I wanted to look back at the slide where you had transitioned what's currently our M2 area into CD3. And my question is, as you transition that area to be all zone CD3, you've said the hope is that that will transition some of what's currently our M2 area to be less pressure in terms of student housing as the CD4 area gets built up in that. What's to prevent it from going the other way, to say this is all zoned the same and have more rental units come in where owner-occupied housing currently is?
So for one thing, if we do it CD3, there are certain, you know, standards that go along with that, use standards, if you will. And then form standards as well. So I'm not sure, and this is what's tricky, because you guys are so expert on all these things. When you ask me a technical question like that, I'm like, wait a minute. My head starts spinning a little bit. So I don't know if I can answer you well enough yet, but as we go through this process, all of this stuff is going to be fleshed out. I feel certain of it. So do you have a thought, Jacob? It wouldn't be. You said it wouldn't be a rooming dwelling district, the CD3, right? Yes.
Yeah, I think part of the answer to that question is how you don't just change the code or the incentives, you also have to consider other factors. Jim mentioned it too, was I-Ride here, public transportation. Look, if you want to encourage apartments along that Ladner corridor to the left there, that's right by the railroad tracks. Put a walking path there, put a trolley there,
Yeah.
north-south trolley. I mean, we got to improve public transportation anyway.
Yeah.
We already talked about lack of east-west routes. You know, public transportation in the big cities, they run the buses on time. It's not dialogue.
Yeah.
So you support this type of character building with public transportation. There is a student that wouldn't want to live right around those railroad tracks right now. Bike down a bike path. I know down at Alma College, they've got bike paths along that railroad right around campus. So to me, boom, it just popped right out.
Yeah.
That's an obvious no-brainer because there's kids walking down that railroad track right now on campus from down to Broomfield on up, and always have. But they would continue to walk on downtown. You know, that leaves pressure off of that inside neighborhood because they'll want to live in a cool place. They'll want to live in a place where they can not have, you know, where they'll feel like it's their own. Plus that side of town could really use some revitalization.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect way to do it. Build along public transportation. Make it cool and easy for kids to get up and down that corridor, and they will.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, I think one of the things that I've heard is you guys have had some of the bus routes become limited or shorter or not as frequent because the ridership was down. So one thing you guys have to do is like all of you to say like, okay, well, once a week I'm going to ride the bus or whatever. You know, like you guys have to help with that because you've got to get those numbers up. You know, it's like it's tricky because they do. They just look at the number, and in some places we go that you know they just run them anyway until stuff happens and people start to come. So that's a good point, though. Who else? Whoa. Just drop the mic on that. Okay, so are we, anybody last? Yes, there we go. Please, yes.
It's really just kind of a follow-up on what Jim was asking and what Sam was asking. And I can talk to Jacob, but I just want to make sure that we have sort of a general idea. It's hard not to think of character-based, particularly as some of what we've talked about here, as just how it looks. And yet, as you look at that area that Sam had you put back up, and you've got the lighter, and this is all going to kind of look the same, and then you got the darker, the purplish, this is where we would like to have the rooming and boarding, that kind of thing. I have two questions. One is, in that area, I mean, what that looked like was Maine and Washington and Douglas in that area. There's already a look that's been encouraged.
Right.
So that's one. And the second part of that, so I'm wondering, what is the difference? You know, what is going to be the difference in the character between those? What do we mean by that? Yep. And the second is, at various meetings that I was at, there was a lot of discussion of alternative kinds of living that involve like an owner-occupied. I'm owner-occupied, and maybe my ability to rent to one or two people might be different than it is if it's not owner-occupied. But that all feels like usage in a way. And that, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm still confused about, so then how does the character overlap with that? So that's what my question is about.
Thank you. That's a good question. So when you think about the character of the neighborhood, let's just say if no one ever had a party, right? Then, yeah, right, done, right? So if no one ever had a party and you and your next door neighbor who may happen to be a student had different schedules and you didn't see them, you would never know what was going on inside the building. It's just a house. It just looks like a house like my house, right? And so the idea is to, in those areas that are all CD3, it just continues on to look like a house. In the other area, what we'll do there is we'll actually add the ability to have some additional building types. So the character would only change insofar that it becomes a little bit more diverse with building types. And so like the image, remember I showed where we took that cool old apartment building that I found in the picture there? Like that, you might see that, which is different, but very compatible with a single family house, right? In its character, right? You see that in historic neighborhoods all over the place. House, 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 apartment, house, 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 you know, those kind of things. So that might occur, or you'd see row houses show up there, you know. The row houses wouldn't be in the CD3. The apartment house look wouldn't be in the CD3, so it'd only be in the CD4. So that's the difference. But the idea isn't, in that case, for massive overhaul and transformation. If it happened over time, it's one of those things where it's if we believe that it's good to have students in close proximity to downtown to a certain extent within certain parameters, then it seems like it's a good place for that to happen, and it can become a little more intense over time, as things change. But the idea is for it to still feel like when you go from CD3 into CD4, you don't even notice. It's like a subtle change, because what's allowed in CD3, this detached single-family house, is also allowed in CD4. So there's an overlap of that typology, and so you can begin to walk in there, and subtle things change. Like, so maybe instead of a continuous planting strip with street trees, it might be more of like a tree well, So it's like there'd be sidewalk, and then at the edge there'd be a certain area that's defined, and it might have grass or some sort of a planting, and there's still a street tree. But just a small little difference. The lighting might change, so it might go from more neighborhood, sort of rural-ish lighting, as you move into a more urban zone. The lighting starts to get a little bit more. It's just small, subtle cues that, again, we're basing this on what we see here, what we see in the region, and just how people have designed and made neighborhoods and cities forever in the most loved places. And so the idea of buffering begins to become unnecessary. You don't need a buffer, you don't need a fence, because it's all compatible. Now, that said, noise and stuff like that, there's nothing you can do buffer-wise for that anyway. So, and that's all just behavioral and those kind of things. And so we understand that that's an issue, but you guys are getting, have that under control and are working on that with all the enforcement. And, I'm giving you credit. I'm giving you guys credit for what you're doing. So, in general, the idea is for it to still feel like downtown Mount Pleasant. That's the real point, even if something transforms in that CD4 area. So, did you just raise your hand? Oh, sorry. Yes.
When you're doing this character change or moving over to one character change, are you factoring in new technology as far as solar array, wind energy? Are people who would be able to put that in their homes or apartments?
Yeah, so what we typically do is, and I've asked about sort of the community's position on environmental sustainability and those types of things. I've gotten some people who are interested in it. I haven't gotten that many takers in it. That said, it doesn't mean we don't do it, right? So when we're working in some cities, it's like you have to require doing these things, right? Other cities, they're like, don't even mention it. I don't even want to hear about that. Most cities, though, say, we want to make it easy for people to do it, so there are no impediments for people to do these things, right? And so that's the kind of thing that we try to think about, is really making sure that it's explicitly allowed to, rather than just silent on it, that you could do like a solar array or those kinds of things. The tricky thing is, though, when it comes to character, and I am excited because Elon Musk has put out these new, solar shingles, and they look really cool if you've seen those. But most solar, no offense to anyone who's an engineer, but they're designed by engineers, right? And so you have this, sort of a solar panel on your roof, and it's like, So when possible, it's awesome if that can go, not facing the front facade. However, with solar orientation, it's got to go where it's got to go to make it work. So I get that. So as we go through this, we need to hear more about that, those kind of things. Like, it sounds like you have some specific interest in this, and so the kind of things that you'd like to see in there, I'd love it if you, just gave Jacob a list of things, and we can start to say, like, oh, cool, this could work here. Because a lot of places we go, we say, wind, and they're like, well, when we drive from the airport to here, it's like, whoa, this is amazing, these massive turbines. So there's obviously some wind around here, you know. So anyway, it's something that we need to think more about and talk more about, but it's something that we want to, you know, make sure that people can do easily. So were you willing to do that, to give Jacob a list?
I work for a company in American Super here in Northwest Michigan, and we're entertaining the idea of putting a solar array on top of the building.
Yeah,
However, we're in the smart zone, Central Michigan University smart zone.
yeah,
Have you given any think tank on that as far as how to build it up, how to improve it, so on and so forth? Getting back to the solar array, the covenants were written in 1985.
Hmm.
So the covenants are kind of out of date with what we are thinking and wanting to do.
yeah,
And so we have to have, or requesting the covenants be updated to kind of incorporate new technology that we could bring into the community.
yeah. So in that regard, you know, that's outside of what we have control over with the zoning, those private covenants. However, we can try to make sure that the zoning's not in conflict with it, so that once you overcome that hurdle, you're not like, oh, now we still can't do it because the city says we can't. So if you will make him a list, and I'd love to look at that and see what kind of, you know, specific things are of interest here. Even things you may not be personally considering doing, but just things that you might, you know, think would be great for the city. Yes.
I get it. Along those lines, there's things that can be done draft-wise, code, making placeholders and plans for things like technology. Because we don't know, like you said, it was written in 85, we don't know it would, the idea of solar arrays, big panels, and you made the point yourself, about right here, right? If you can make it look like a shingle, or look like a siding, or look, that's a more integrated thing.
Yeah.
Then it ought not to inhibit that application at all.
Yeah.
Within character. And to me, those are like placeholders and plugins. Plus, the city can also incentivize those types of things in separate legislation, separate codes that plug in. That's what I mean by placeholders and plugins.
Yeah.
It's a code that's flexible, it can be drafted flexibly enough to where it can evolve, be flexible without wholesale change.
Yeah.
Hitting roadblocks or big walls.
Right. Right. Yep. I agree. Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention, well, I've been working on PACE financing for counties for 2 years. The law passed in 2010. And what it is, it wouldn't help you, sir, but what it is the county declares a PACE authority. That's been done in Leelanau, Kalamazoo, Midland County, some municipalities. But basically what it means is if you spend $5,000 a month on electricity, which would be certain places, then it'll be feasible for you to finance your solar array. And it's collected in taxes, and it stays with the building. And if you don't pay it, it comes out of your taxes. And but the thing is people have been pushing this for a long time, but people don't want to do it. I also want to say you don't always have to buy your solar arrays. You can lease them. And there's another plan that's called solar gardening, which means, and which me and my partner are doing, which means that you can buy into a solar array, because about 60% of houses can't have solar arrays on there for one reason or another. But I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to do, and it's very important because we're going to be closing all those coal plants, and it's very important because of climate change. There's some really fantastic, compelling reasons why people should be doing it yesterday.
Sounds like you guys have a local expert, so anybody who wants to do solar and things, I know who you need to talk to. So, who else? All right, so anybody freaked out? Anybody have concerns? Anybody worried about? Okay, good. Okay.
Showed what Mission Street will look like or could look like.
Yep.
I mean, I don't understand how that happens. Like, for all the existing businesses that are already there.
Yeah.
That look a certain way.
Right.
How do they change?
Thank you.
something else?
That's a great question.
Is this just for new businesses coming in, like you have to blah, 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 blah now?
Yep.
Or-
So what would happen is, and we'll just use the example here on the corner that we showed. So let's just say Wayside, if they wanted to do that, right? The zoning would allow it. and they just decide to do it. And so they either develop it they themselves, or you would, sell the property, or you do whatever you want to do, and you're just allowed to do it. But you don't have to do it until such time as you go to do something different with your building, right? So in the past, we've been talking about, incentives and those kind of things, and it seems like there may be a desire to move away from the incentive and just have requirements. And so as new development happens on the corridor, it happens in that character, but you're not forced to go, next year and go, tear your business down and do whatever. So I will say this, it's not easy to redevelop a suburban corridor, because let's just say, for instance, if one person wants to do something and they only have this much frontage, right, on the street or whatever, and the idea is to have a block, right, an urban-looking block, but the next guy over is not ready to do anything, it's difficult to do. And so it takes some consolidation, some coordination, but it is being done around the country. I just want to sort of just be upfront and say it's not as easy as doing greenfield development. But thankfully, you guys are a very, very desirable place to do business. That corridor is, that university is a huge draw. And so, and what will happen is, there'll be some period of time where, it's like, I can't do this. This won't pencil. I can't, you'll hear all of these things being said, hopefully not by everybody. There also will be people, I think, we see this in most communities, that are excited about, like, oh my gosh, I just got all this density that I can do. Before I was just doing like this ground floor commercial. Now I can have ground floor commercial and I can have this residential above. And so in some ways, if you think about it, the mindset starts to shift, because we know there's a demand for apartments and student kind of housing, right? So people along the corridor, you could actually start thinking about the residential as being the big profit part, and then the ground floor commercial is the bonus, right? So in either, however you think about it, there's the bonus of being able to do that. There's the benefit of doing it. The national chain retailers was like, we don't want our parking to be anywhere except for in front of us, and we'll just go to the next town over. And you guys say, okay, go ahead. Yeah, right. Do they have a university? I don't think so, And so, those are the kind of things you guys have to decide. We've proposed it. You guys have to decide whether or not you're really willing to go there and do that and take a position like that. I'm encouraged to see that, people are already taking baby steps. They're already having some mixed use that's underway out there. You're already having buildings that are being built up to the street. You've done things already with the overlay. That was sort of like the first step, the toe in the water. This is actually taking you there, and by making it a requirement, it starts to level the playing field. It's not like, I can kind of sort of do it if I kind of sort of want to do it, and maybe I won't, maybe I will. And it's a little bit, I have to think about it a little bit more instead of doing the normal formula to do suburban retail stuff. And so, if you require it, it ends up happening. It takes a while. Things move slow. But anyway, so that's the idea. The other thing I didn't say is, the idea would be that, this would be not exclusively, but maybe focused on student housing, right, as one thing, but also looking at encouraging more downtown housing around the downtown for like young professionals, for graduate students. We heard that, those are the kinds of people that we think that, are kind of doing a good job of sort of living in that downtown environment. And so looking for opportunities specifically in and around the downtown, taking away impediments like the sprinklers, like right now, that's why a lot of people can't have people living above, is because it costs too much to run the sprinkler line. I don't understand all the specific details of it, but this is what I'm being told. And so thankfully, you already do have some people living downtown, a good number, more than I would have expected. But we sounds like there's a desire for more, and it will help downtown more. Every person that lives downtown is helping the businesses, the merchants, and all of that stuff. And so if you want to really get your downtown where you all say you want it to be, you need to do whatever you can do to get people living down there. I think will be crucial. And also, like the bus riding, you have to go down there yourselves once a week at least. Go down and buy a hot dog. Go down and, get some sushi. Do whatever you need to do. Go buy a bike at least once a week, right? So, Anyway, so nobody's freaked out, nobody's concerned. Who's excited? Okay, great. Ooh, show of hands. I didn't even expect for that. So, okay. So I'm not going to keep you guys any longer. As much as I'd like you to keep asking questions, if you don't have any more for me tonight, I'm sure you'll go marinate on this and have plenty for Jacob tomorrow. You know where his office is. This is just the end of the beginning, right? We're just at the beginning of this, so stay involved. Make sure you come. Make sure you give input. There may be a night when everybody who comes says, this is the worst idea I've ever heard. So for those of you who just raise your hand and think you're excited about this, you need to make sure that you're at every meeting that has to do with this code, character-based code. Every hearing, everything that happens, you need to stay involved in and come say, I like it. Because don't assume that everybody else is going to come and say they like it. If you say, oh, I'm going to stay at home tonight and just watch it on TV, that might be the night where you really needed to come say how much you like it. So these things are not easy. This is a change. So be prepared for growing pains as we go through this process of writing and adopting and thinking and all of that stuff. But if this process continues on like I've seen the past 4 days, this is going to be amazing because I can tell you guys want to take it to the next level, that you want to accomplish great things. And, you know, one of the things that I found is in this community, like in many others, this is a really good community. This is really good. There's all kinds of good stuff here and there and everywhere. And the problem is that good is the enemy of great, right? And so you're like, oh, this is pretty good. Oh, I don't need to go out. Oh, this is great. So if you want to get to that next level and accomplish all of these things that you wrote down here and you said and you've heard us repeat back to you, you've got to make this happen. So with that, thank you for all your participation.